a holistic approach. I mean, the money, the business is an important side of things, but if that's all I focused on with these individuals, Alexi cares
Yeah.
about his bottom line. And
Yeah.
that's all he wants, right?
Are you experiencing lack of mentorship and might not want to ask because you don't want to look incompetent? Is the thought of being imperfect keeping you from taking action? Welcome to Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans Season 3. Each week, we interview senior leaders to uncover the inner workings of being a strategic leader and how they curate a corporate coaching culture. We debunk some common misconceptions by exploring their failures and successes as imperfect humans. This weekly mentorship will help you with tactics to play the game, navigate the politics, and think strategically. From the heart of Calgary, Canada, here's your host, award-winning coach, Kalloo.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another exciting week. We have Alexi here, and again, we'll put all his info in the show notes. But I really want to talk a little bit about Alexi just here before we kind of jump right into it. And so, Alexi, how do I pronounce your last name, by the way?
Olcheski.
Olcheski. So there it is.
You
But
got it.
what I'm finding out is that you don't even need your last name because people
No.
just know you as Alexi. So we'll talk about
Straight
that.
up.
Right? You just need that one name.
Prince.
Yeah, you just need that one name. So Alexi actually is the Executive Vice President and Principal of Avison Young Commercial Real Estate here in Calgary. And so his specialty is really more about office tenant, landlord representation, as well as the office sales sector. Now, interesting to know about Alexi, he's a leader in Calgary's office market. Over the past decade or so, Alexi has provided absolute trust, value, insights to all of his clients and his partners. And he has a ton of accomplishments. And I'm just going to rattle off a few. So hopefully you don't mind, Alexi, but 750 plus transactions, over 2.5 million square footage of office space, over 1.5 billion lease sale transaction volume. That is a lot. How the heck do you do so much? What's the secret there? Can you tell us?
You've got a pretty good program, Kyle. So life is not, it's very monotonous, but I found it's very good from a productivity standpoint. So just run the same program day in, day out. And yeah, we just kind of stick to the script every day, and we've come up with a methodology that seems to work and seems to be getting us the results we want. So yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's not that exciting, it's not that sexy, but it gets the job done. So we keep doing it.
Yeah, I like that. And, one of the things that we really wanted to focus in our season 3 was, we know you can't do this by yourself. We know that there's a team of people that's usually behind. And I think sometimes people, they see the end result and they think, oh, this is amazing. He's got it easy. These things must have been, given to them or whatever. But they don't realize there's a lot of stuff that happens. And, sometimes there's this fear of failure. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think what we tend to forget is that we're all imperfect human beings, right? There's days that we think we could be better, and there's days that we hit it out the park. And so, for a lot of our listeners who are emerging senior leaders or people who may be interested in leadership, I wanted us to have a little bit more of a conversation around what is the story behind, how do you start it as leader? And maybe we could learn a few things from that. So did you even imagine that you would lead a team, such a successful team?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Kyle, I did. And, I think from a very early age, just for whatever it is, genetics, but for some reason, I've always kind of taken a leadership position. I think early on in my life, being a former hockey player, I usually had, either an A on my jersey or a C on my jersey.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a natural leadership ability there from a very early age. And something which I take a lot of pride in, which I really enjoy, is leading groups of people towards a common goal, taking people, from a very basic level, and then, just helping them achieve their full potential. So I guess from an early age, it was there. It's always been there, and I'm feel very grateful and blessed that is there, and it's something that I enjoy. It's definitely one of the most fun parts of my job.
Yeah, you know what? You talked about something because I think a lot of people sometimes question between are you a born leader or are you a leader that has been nurtured or can be trained? So I know for
Right.
you kind of always had it. You know, do you think people have to always have it, or do you think it's a possibility for them to learn?
It's a great question, Kyle. And I have a 7-year-old daughter,
Hmm.
and she has it. She's born with it instantly. She's
Yeah.
just a natural leader. I consider her everything she does whenever she interacts with people. Um, and I don't know. I suspect anything can be learned.
Hmm.
Much like sales, right? Some people are natural sellers. Some people really have to try very hard at it. To be frank with you, the people that I've seen be the most successful with it are those who it seems to be something inherent within them. That's my
Hmm.
perspective on it. And I can't speak to it personally from a development perspective. I think I've
Right.
obviously grown a lot over the years, but it's always been something inherent within me. And like I said, now I'm seeing it in my next generation
Yeah.
of lineage. So
Yeah.
I'm watching it now every day, and I'm excited about it, and
Yeah.
I'm really happy to hopefully bring another future leader into this world.
Yeah, you should be excited, and they say it's the same feelings as fear. You should fear what that's gonna look like, because I think that's the other piece of it is what type of leader people become. I mean, I'll tell you an interesting story for me. I think it's something similar to you. I resonate with that. Sometimes you just kind of have it in you. I never really wanted to lead. I just was always put in those positions of leadership because I felt, you know what, I do it really well. I want to keep doing it, what it is, and I now have to show someone else how to do it. Like what? Like no, I just want to focus on me. But what I found out early on in my career is I started to model some very ineffective leadership behaviors,
Right.
right? And this is my viewpoint. Maybe it's just me, but I've worked with a lot of shitty leaders, and I've learned not to do that.
Yeah.
And I even though I had every intention not to do it, I saw in my own leadership where I was doing it. I was, command and control when it didn't need
Right.
to be. Because there's times you need to do it, right? But
Yeah.
there's times where you just need to be. So, what was your journey to make sure you didn't? I mean, because should I be talking to your team if you're a shitty leader, or like, what would they tell me?
You know what? I think they say positive things, certainly when I'm
Okay.
around, but from what I've heard, not when I'm not around as well. So I'm
Okay.
relatively optimistic you get a pretty good response from them. But Kyle, I was thinking about the question a little bit, and I was very fortunate early on in my career. Not long after graduating from university, I got aligned with a gentleman, and he was a market leader. He was a winner.
Okay.
Everything he touched turned to gold, and I followed this guy around like a puppy for
Mm,
months and years on end, and I just sucked in as much information as I
right.
could from him. He was aggressive. He was very micromanaging, but his results were always spectacular, always top. And so I've largely modeled myself off that. Certainly early on in my career, and at about 25 years old, I got an opportunity to lead, and I was basically just a carbon copy of him.
Yeah.
Changed industries, changed jobs, changed careers. Fortunately, as I've integrated into Avison Young, there's different leaders with different perspectives, and being able
Right.
to integrate that into my game, I think has rounded me out holistically. But I think it all comes down to, as you alluded to, leadership. There's one individual who really stands out in the early days, is still a dear friend and mentor to me. But being able to add a bunch of different peripheral players into
Right.
it to round out the game, the results have been overwhelming. Because had I just continued along that particular vein that I learned, many years ago, it'd be a very one-sided individual, and definitely with all the different individuals on the team, and the different dynamics
Yeah.
in that world, we kind of hired everybody looked, talked, and acted the same, right? So it's very easy. We live in a
Right. Yeah.
different state now, and I
Yeah.
have a very diverse team, and not everybody's going to respond to the same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it comes with age, it comes with growth and experience. And I
Yeah.
think I've done a good job, certainly over the last few years. And again, it all comes down to having really great leadership and mentorship across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully
I
that
really
answers.
like what you said about being well-rounded. And I'm going to get back to, how you're able to create what I call a corporate coaching culture that allows for these people to do really well. And I'll come back to that in a second. I'm curious about maybe some of the failures, like, because people who are listening sometimes often just want to understand. Sometimes they resonate with, like, because I said, sometimes they see the end product, but they have no idea that journey. They don't know what it
Right.
was like for you to be that
Yep.
lap dog, right? Following around, and may have heard one or two words where you're just like, is he supposed to talk to me like that? But okay, I'm learning, right? But what are some failures you would say, that maybe stood out for you in your leadership?
I had to think about that, Kyle, because to be honest, that fortunately there hasn't been a lot of failures professionally. It's been a really great ride, but there is one in particular. So I came back to Calgary, I guess it was 12 years ago now,
Okay.
and started working for another organization that will remain nameless, and for a leader who will remain nameless as well. But suffice to say, Kyle, it was a horrendous experience. I'd come from being on top of the game and leading a large team and having tons of success and having tons of autonomy, to working directly for a leader where there was no synergies, there was no alignment. It was just an unmitigated disaster. It ended after 4 months, and it ended with my termination, to an industry that I had invested 5 years of my career to. I've made it to the
Right.
top on, and it was very humbling. Certainly, through that failure, I was introduced to commercial real estate, and it's been the greatest thing professionally that's ever
Yes.
happened to me, being involved in this industry. So that would definitely be. It was a failure. It was a disaster. We came out the other side of it,
Yeah.
but you're used to being successful in everything you've
Yes.
done, and in this particular career, you've made a lot of money. You've acquired some expenses as a result
Mm-hmm.
of the lifestyle, and then to be kind of smacked down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very challenging time for me. And it was probably a few months before I really started to get back on my feet. And I guess that ties into when I first got into commercial real estate. I'd been managing
Mm-hmm.
teams of upwards to 20 people, and with different corporations, different cities, different roles. And then I started at Avison Young, and I was a low man on the totem pole, and it was a very humbling experience for me to go from being a somebody, or at least thinking I was a somebody, to just the newest cog on the wheel. So I would say that's probably the best professional example I can give you, Kyle.
Yeah, it's interesting because, sometimes our confidence can get shook in that moment, right? Where you're like, hey, as an athlete, you're doing stuff, you do games, you do these things, you enjoy it, you study this craft, you got mentored, you do these things. And then for whatever reason, a particular leader can really change that game for you,
Yeah.
right? Where you're just like, oh, I really thought I did all the pieces, which I think is what commonly happens. And so sometimes some leaders need to be able to recognize that they really play such a pivotal role in their organization as we think about creating that corporate coaching culture that allows people to be flourished. Because I'm sure you'd agree with me, had been given an opportunity to be nurtured, to say, here's some autonomy, here's some things that you could master, and just given an opportunity to do it, you'd probably would have done great things for these guys.
I concur with that assessment. Absolutely, absolutely. It's and going back to that failure, Kyle. It was money driven, and that was a big learning lesson for me as well. I made the decision based on remuneration, immediate
Right.
remuneration, and that was a really big learning lesson for me,
Yeah.
because as other opportunities have arisen, money is important in business, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but there are other factors as it relates to long-term success that are far,
Mm-hmm.
far more significantly important than just the
Yeah.
short-term monetary aspect.
Yeah, I mean, and we appreciate those people when you don't have money is a big issue, of course, right? But what you actually just said there, Lexi, is more around the sustainability can't just be money driven, right? Because at some
Absolutely.
point you get to a level where then what? Like if you have nothing else to show for that, right? And so, what would you summarize as the bottom line around the silver lining from that failure, right? Because now you're obviously doing quite well. Some will say, did that have to happen to you for you to be where you are today? I don't know. Like, what do you think?
You know what? It's a great question, and I think to a degree it did have to happen because it was just such a nice comfort blanket, and the money was good enough where I would have stayed and I would have been happy.
Yeah.
So had something really significant not have happened, who knows? But I
Who knows?
suspect
Yeah.
it certainly it would have come to an end. It would have come to an end longer. I would have had less energy to pursue this particular endeavor. And I mean, the silver lining is, I don't want to sound cliche, but I'm kind of a spiritual guy and just
Yeah.
try to model myself as a spiritual leader. But
Mm-hmm.
at risk of, and I will sound cliche, but everything happens for a reason. I truly
Yeah.
believe it. And this is one of these ones that brought me back to Calgary, which was a city I wanted to be back in, a city I love, and a place where I could see myself, growing and building my future. It was an industry that wasn't long term for me, and I really stumbled upon this, and from a professional perspective, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'd be able to create a really great career, a really great life out of this business, and had that failure not have happened, this wouldn't have come up. And it was really hard to imagine or
Mm-hmm.
anticipate at that time because it was such a humbling experience for
That's
me.
right. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to applaud you there, Alexi, because I think you took an opportunity to create a silver lining for yourself. That's really what it is. And so the clients I work with, we see that quite often is when you saw that as an opportunity to say, listen, not only did I get knocked down, but I'm going to get back up and get back in line, right? And for those spiritual folks who are listening, yes, that is a line from a gospel song. But, that's a part of it, right? It's getting back up is one thing, but just getting back in that line to say, how can I make something of this? Is a part of it, because the fear of failure for a lot of people is that they don't even want to get knocked down at all, right? Instead of, how do I get back? You may know this person's a good friend of mine, Oprah Winfrey. When when she got fired, people are like, oh, Oprah Winfrey got fired from a job before, and they're like, well, hold on, she wasn't Oprah Winfrey when she got fired from the job, right? She became Oprah Winfrey because she got fired from the job, right? And so there's some moments where I think that for leaders out there who think, how do I do this? What if I get knocked down? What if I'm not there? How do I step back into it? That is all a part of it. So one last question I had around this piece around corporate coaching culture. How do you ensure that the folks who are on your team when we talk about corporate culture, corporate coaching culture is about making sure people have access to leadership, to their own development, that they're in a role that allows them to really be inspired. Is there anything you could share that you would think that you have done in your organization, on your team, that allows for your people to be their better self, if for example?
I think, Kyle, the reason there's opportunities available in our industry for bright individuals with motivation, and I always tell them that I said, come interview with me. This is my deal. This is the way I roll. This is the way I operate. It's not for everyone. It's intense. It's hardcore. I expect huge commitments out of people. So go talk to everybody else. If there's a better fit for you, for your growth long term, please take that role, because if we're not aligned together, it's going to be more costly for me. It's going to be a huge disadvantage for everyone. So I always encourage everybody to say, I don't have to be your first and last up. Go see what else is out there. Some
Yeah.
people never come back, and that's all the power to them. No hard feelings whatsoever. But the people who come back say, hey, I know your program. I'm into it. I want to be a part of this.
Right.
Say, excellent. And let's roll. And I'm very fortunate that, again, the longevity, the tenure of everybody who's worked for me. I mean, we're in it for life. Together. I'm all about their development. And again, it's their business development, but it's their personal development as well. It's their relationships, it's their families. Yes. It's a holistic approach. I mean, the money, the business is an important side of things, but if that's all I focused on with these individuals, Alexi cares about his bottom line. That's all he wants, right? And I really, really look at each individual, and they're so different, especially at this point in time, to say, what's their individual drivers? How can I support them from a holistic level? And, we talked about the spiritual side of things. I encourage reading. We're always talking about, from that level of development. I'm into meditation. I'm into Buddhism to a degree. I try to share that. It's, some people like it, some people don't. You know what? Be open to the idea. Be open to I think it helps, long-term. Physicality is a thing that's also very important to me. I'm an avid gym guy. Most of my team is or has become avid gym people as a result, right? You need the mind, you need the spirit, you need the body. Without all three of those, you're gonna burn out. You're gonna do something to yourself, and you're not gonna be who I need you to be in this particular role. So, it's a very holistic approach. I don't know if I answered the question appropriately.
You did. No, you totally did, because if you don't create a culture where your people are not thinking about the mind, body, spirit, that whole piece of them, because it's not just this one thing. Because if you are not ready for it, and if you don't create an environment people can do that, then it's short-lived. Like you said, if you're not looking at all these factors, because if you're just going and killing the deals and sales and you're doing all that stuff, but at the cost of alienating your team, yourself, it's not sustainable. No one wants that, right? And you kind of touch on, my last question I was going to ask you around, what could you say to an emerging senior leader, someone who really wants to up their game in leadership? Is there one thing that you could bottom line that says, listen, if you start doing this now, you're going to be further ahead than trying to do 55 other things?
You know what, Kyle? My short answer, something that I can't make a short answer. Clearly, I have to. my short answer that turns into a long story. Read books. That's the short answer, and it's something that I put into my repertoire roughly a decade ago, let's say, give or take. I wish I would have done it sooner, and I invest a lot of my personal time into reading. And, before it was a lot of business, leadership, that level of books, but now it's very holistic. And I think that just opens up and builds your game to a degree that, it's, we finish, you're a Queens guy, I'm a Queens guy. It's like you finish, okay, good, I'm smart now, I can go and take over the world. But education changes, and you've got to constantly be on top of everything that's going on. You want a holistic approach so you can understand individuals, clientele, everybody. So read books.
Yeah, I love that. And to be honest, I think that's up there. My mom would say to me when I was quite younger, she'd often say, silver and gold will vanish away, but a good education will never decay. And how you stay, top notch, how do you, expand your mindset? Because there's times I read a book and I'm like, damn, how, that's what I meant. I didn't even know that's what it was. Or I have no idea. How the hell did this happen? How come I never know this, right? And it really stretches someone. And I think in leadership, it's about being able to stretch a little bit. It's not for it to be out of reach, but how do you just stretch? Alexi, I really appreciate you being on the show today. You've had a ton of insight today, just talking about the holistic approach and thinking about, how do you connect your mind, body, and spirit on those pieces, and making sure that people look for the opportunities in these failures, because that is the silver lining, right? Is how do we look for some opportunities? And you talk about something that I really think a lot of leaders should be mindful of, is being humble, right? Because if you're not going to humble yourself, make no mistake, someone will do it for you, right? So you better Yeah, you better get used to it because that will happen.
Absolutely.
Lexi, thank you so much for being on. I can't tell you how helpful this is. I'm interested to hear from some of you folks. How has this really helped you? Is there one particular imperfect inspired action that you're able to take out of our conversation here today? Let us know in the show notes. And if you have not done so, please share this podcast, please subscribe, and also do that download because we have so many fantastic leaders out there who's willing to help and mentor you through the podcast. We'll see you next week. Take care.
There you have it. Thank you for listening. It's our goal to build a global community of inspired action takers, and we can only do that with your help. So, if you love Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans podcast, please leave us a review on your favorite podcasting app. Provide a rating, download, subscribe, and share us on your socials. New episodes every Tuesday. You've heard from us. Now, we want to hear from you. Keep the conversation going by joining our private Facebook group, Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans, or go to inspiredactionpodcast.ca and tell us, what is the inspired action you took this week? Next week on Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans.
When you empower people to have their voice and you hear their voice, then they have buy-in and you allow them to maybe fall and skin their knees the odd time in whatever role they have.
Yeah.
They're empowered. They have buy-in to the common goal that you have going.